Well, we move on to the pretty much the next to last week of the semester, um, and and in this video, as long as my voice holds up, it is. Um, I want to talk about this week's reading assignment, the revisions of the essays you'll all have back very soon. Only a few left. Your special projects again, which I discussed last week, but a couple more pointers, and then the final exam uh, and how to study for it. Um, and let's begin then with the assignment for this week. The reading assignment. Um, I have taken some material off, and I see in the beginning it says New Zealand, Australia, Chinese and Caribbean immigrant, and American Indian. This is what it used to be. I've changed the stories that you'll need, and basically, your novel talks. It will center on, of course, the Maori people in contemporary New Zealand, and then you're going to have a Chinese and Japanese immigrants, the Chinese working on the railroad in California, and the Japanese uh, in Canada during the Second World War. Um, so you have half the novel to read, and you do have um, a video for part one. I'm asking you to try to read, excuse me, half the novel. I suggested last week that you start. Now, you'll find on the discussion thread two, I believe. Just look at the new discussion threads for the week, and there's a link there to a Maori dictionary to help you with the language. Uh, um, she doesn't give you obvious, sometimes, translations of Patricia Grace, that is, of what the actual words mean. In most instances, the context makes clear. You can figure out what the word is for that giant eel-like fish. Um, among other things, is the importance of the community building in which one finds the traditional um, totems, um, that artwork that's at the center of the story. Okay, so look at them, look over give the video a listen. It's probably about a half an hour long, and then read carefully. Now, an excerpt from Obasan is by Joy Kogawa. Joy is a second generation, I believe, Japanese writer, um, and the story comes from Canada. Now, this story also covers the terrible bombings of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, um, and what there you might think of from the Japanese perspective. Clearly, the internment camps were not something positive, and you'll see from the camp that the Canadians, like the Americans, put Japanese into these camps, seeing all the Asians basically as potential terrorists after the devastation of Pearl Harbor. And in this particular story, Kogawa's relatives, and the whole is this is excerpt from a really wonderful novel, um, uh, and where Kogawa comes to realize what actually happened to these people. And so you will get some descriptions of the terrible bombing and the effects it had on the people of Hiroshima. Um, and there was a big Catholic church in Nagasaki, for instance. The irony is that people went there often to both places, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for the reason that her relatives did, the fire bombings of Tokyo. So the irony is they went to be safe, and they'll never coming home. Uh, you see the effects, the terrible, terrible scarring, for instance, from the firebomb fire. Uh, you can look on the internet, and I may well give you some suggestions or links to some of the photographs, of the photographs of the shadows of bodies that were disintegrated on one of the bridges over Hiroshima. And it's an interesting story because in the end, Sensei is saying you have to forgive, and the protagonist, the first person author, is suggesting, well, maybe not quite ready for that yet. It's a very moving story in that respect. And the other is The Grandfather of Sierra Nevada Mountains, and this is by Maxine Hung Kingston, who often writes of the Chinese immigrant experience in the United States. In Canada, there were even laws that these Chinese people could only work as, if they aren't working on the railroad, they can work as, they can have a restaurant or a laundry place. And so Maxine Kingston is giving voice to her grandfather, who worked on the railroad through the Sierra Nevada mountains, and the Chinese laborers would come over for a period of 7 to 9 years and never see home, and we go back and then come back again. There are some wonderful books about that experience if you care to read them. I'm trying to think of an author, and maybe I'll remember before the end of the video another of the Chinese American authors who write about this experience and giving voice to someone we've not heard from before, because usually when you see photographs taken from the mountains and the construction of the railroad, it's not the workers who get heralded, it's the white overseers. And so through the story, she gives you some insights into the plight of the people. And her father is a story of power and powerlessness, and so don't let the masturbation in the story bother you, but it's it's screwing the world. This guy works as a dangerous job in a basket, that a job which often kills people, and no one even bothers to bury them. So read it carefully, and there's also a story within a story here about a very popular myth, almost a fairy tale, a folk story, or story of wonder, if you will, about a man and a woman, and the fact that they're not going to see each other, and it ties in the something about the way the stars form and things like that is pretty much equal to the number of years that these people contract for when they go to work for the railroad for not a hell of a lot of money. Now, Judith Wright is a great Aussie poet, and Border Ring, it's a short poem, and again, with all these stories, you have notes, and you have more notes than what's assigned. But the Border Ring poem is, Australia was founded basically by criminals. They were transported, as was the word that was used, from England or Great Britain to Australia, thousands of them, and to a lesser degree other places in the area there, some to the United States, but not many, compared to how many went on the crossings over to Australia. If any of you have read, for instance, Great Expectations, you'll see that in Great Expectations, Magwitch, who is the supporter of Pip, well, Pip thinks it's the Ms. Havisham, is a criminal, and he is transported or sent, if you will, to Australia, and he escapes and then comes back again, for which he's hunted down. But he made his fortune in Australia, because after you serve a certain amount of time, you could get land, and that's basically what they did, and they took it away from, of course, the Aboriginal migratory tribes, and the Border Ring was a central feature of the culture and the religion. It's a place where one went to meet wives, where different tribes would get together, and you'll notice that Wright is talking about something to do with the loss that came from the conflict or of the initial and ongoing interactions between the white invaders, the white immigrants, and the indigenous people, who, unlike, as you'll see in your novel uh, Patiki, the Maori that you meet are not migratory in the same way that the Aboriginal tribes were, and some still remain, but not much, in Australia. So these stories introduce you, and the poem introduce you to something of what goes on with immigrants, um, and also the conflicts that have to do, especially in Patricia Grace's novel, between this group of people who wants to reinvigorate traditional ways and the onslaught of modernity, which means if you have a nice beach, it needs to have a Club Med. That's basically what's going on there. And the workers in the novel come into a big way towards in the second half are also Maori, and they will eventually revolt against the white overseers, as you will come to see. The novel does have some hope there, but there is the hope after some tragedy ensues, as you'll see. This novel challenges on a number of ways, and language is one of them. So be patient as you read these first-person accounts, and you'll have different ones from, as I write in the discussion thread, three of the major three characters, including a little boy, um, um, who is, I suspect you would say he's been injured from birth. He has some defects that make him almost an invalid. I will make a quiz video for you. This time there are only 11 questions, so it'll be short. Thought I'd give you a break, and I'll go over the questions when when I make that video over the next couple days. That'd be one for quiz 7. Now, you have until Saturday, December 14th at midnight to complete all the requirements for the class, which leaves you now with a final examination, an oral presentation, and if time permitting for you and the desire, a revision of your essays. Now, I spend about 40 minutes on these essays because I want you to revise, and I want to do something to help you to make your writing and your organizational techniques stronger. Now, also, as part of the preparation for the final exam, I've already made available to you from the folder for week 5 assignments some good responses from the past from students who have taken the midterm exams. Now, I'll get them back to you by the end of this week. They'll be completed, and then you can get ready for your final examination. Now, the final examination, those will help you with your final examination because there's not time to make incredibly long comments about the exam. I take care of that with the essay to help you in that way. Now, the final exam will be much like the midterm exam, okay? This time, though, if you look to the link for final exam, you'll see that parts 1 and 2 will be open from Tuesday morning until midnight Friday. But again, I changed everything up, and then you'll see there's a contradiction there that I will fix. Tuesday, December 10th to Saturday at midnight, December 14th. So get all that down. It's not Tuesday through Friday. It's Tuesday morning until midnight Saturday. Also, if you look to part 2, you'll see that you can start on the exam pretty much now. Look at the part 2 responses that talk about at least 2 double-spaced pages, One of the following choices I give you, and A has to do with Derek Walcott and this whole idea of giving voice to the voiceless that we find in various places. He says in one of his poems, Walcott does, that I'm either a nobody or a nation. This person of mixed blood from St. Lucia. He says, and elsewhere he wrote that I met history once, but he ain't recognized me. And that is to say, the history is written by the Europeans and others, and they don't take into consideration the slaves, so we don't hear from them, as you do in Martin Carter's wonderful poem that's in the link in one of the notes areas. And I heard tongueless whisperings as if some buried slave wanted to speak again. And so it's talking about their deaths and things like that. You saw that, for instance, in the poem about the United Fruit Company. So in your response, you can talk about the 3 novels that we read, 3 of the 4 novels we read, and you can use 1 or more areas of conflict: education, gender, religion, oral tradition, something else you can think about to organize your analysis. Now, you can also do another character analysis. One would be on Becca Lamb, and another would be on Ramwata, Toko, or Hemi. And again, in your analysis, you want to do what I've been writing a lot on papers is you just don't want to describe the character, but you want to describe the character's qualities and their significance in terms of the narratives concerned with larger issues. So you'd have the tradition and modernity at the center of any discussion of Ramoida, Toiko, or Hemi, and you want to tie them into the central issues as the Maori peoples try to maintain some of the cultural traditional values threatened by modernity. It's not completely to escape modernity, as you come to find out. While a couple of the kids are homeschooled, for instance, others go out and study to do things like become lawyers, which is important if you're going to have legal problems. You don't have to go and hire some white lawyer who doesn't know anything of your plight. Now, I give you a list here of the stories you want to focus on. Of course, the novel Potiki and Becca Lamb, and So I Go in Her First Ball, which you'll read next week. And So I Go is by the woman who wrote Potiki. His First Ball, you'll find out, is a parody of a famous story from New Zealand called Her First Ball, written by a fabulous woman writer, a white woman from who was New Zealand's first really great recognized internationally. The author, what's her name is Mansfield. I can't remember her first name, but at any rate, she wrote a story called Her First Ball, in which no Maori appears. It's just not in her system. I'm Your Horse in the Night, Girl, that poem United Fruit Company, the stories Phantom Palace and The Spoiler's Return, the stories Shoemaker Arnold, The Grandfather of the Sierra Nevada Mountains, and Obasan. And I mean, what you want to study is, in Potiki, you have the Dollar Man there. So what's the Dollar Man's significance to the tale? Dollar Man representing modernity without even thinking of, the consequences or the fact that these people have their own ideas. And you have Girl, and you want to think to them, say, how does the title Girl relate to the situation as it unfolds in that narrative, what we would call a prose poem, if you will. Another one, in I'm Your Horse in the Night, there was this, as we saw, was a story about the the what the government did to the uh, people during the regime of the generals, if you will. We have Beto, is not Beto's name, and she makes some interesting comments like this one that you can think about. Beto, I say, looking at him, I know that isn't his real name, but it's the only one I can call him out loud. You can even call your lover by the first name. Um, you know that he also in the Phantom Palace, this magic, wonderful magic realism. Um, and so you want to think about what does Marcia Lieberman, okay, have in common with the Phantom Indians that cements their bond, and she's happy to live with them. What do they represent? Um, and in the Microdust to El Salvador, you have a situation not unlike what you find in I'm Your Horse in the Night. Um, but notice at the end of the story, or it also, maybe it's not quite at the end. I mean, she's happy at the end that her aunt told her to go to the city, if you will. But Beatrice means, what do you think? What does she mean, for instance, when she says that she does not count herself among the innocent, and therefore she will not be a victim? Um, an important point that I raised in previous videos. Um, Now, you also read some Derek Walcott poems, two of them at least. Um, and think about the spoiler's return. I was thinking about this yesterday because one of our students will do a report and maybe sing some calypso for you. But what role does the calypso singer play in Walcott's poem, The Spoiler's Return? So look at your class notes and things like that and think about, what is the significance of that role? And another one of another of the stories that you read, it's not deep or anything like that. It has a lot of humor in it, which is the story, Earl Lovelace's story, Shoemaker Arnold. Um, and in the end of the story, you see that there has been a change of perspective. Um, Norbert has affected uh, the shoemaker, Arnold. And then the end of the story, it has a line with all the wonderful dancing and music going on. And it says that, and Arnold sat and thought about this girl, the one that filled the world with breathlessness and the scent of aloes and leaves and moss. And he felt if she was sitting there beside him, he would be glad to dead too. Um, and so his perspective on what makes life worth living has gone beyond the confines of his beyond the confines of his shoe store, from which he drove almost all the people. With respect to And So I Go, that you will read next week, very pretty poetic short story. You have the following lines that I want you to think about. This land is mine, this sea, these people. Here I give love and am loved, but I must go. This is in me. I go to learn new ways and to make a way for those who follow because I love. And here you find again, this is at the heart of our story, our novel. How do you confront modernity if you don't know anything about it? This also happens in the novel Whale Riders. If you listen to the videos there, the uncle goes, he leaves New Zealand and goes to Australia and then on to New Guinea, and he develops an idea about himself by going, and he's better able to confront modernity because he's experienced it. And so, likewise, in the novel, again, I said while the some of the children stay at home and are homeschooled, it doesn't mean that the mother and the father completely disallow anything to do with modernity, because again, the son and the daughter leave, and she's going to be a lawyer. uh, how better to confront it? You have to get out and know. So it's only a sacrifice if you really love. So she, in the story, has a reason for leaving um, the reservation, if you will, the land allocated to the Maori tribes. In the story by Ime Wetahara, who wrote the Whale Rider, a fine film, by the way, and he writes this story. Uh, his first ball, which I told you is in Kate Mansfield's story, is her first ball. He wrote a whole collection of stories that write back against her stories, which upset a lot of people because, I mean, she's a fine writer, but she did not embrace at all anything to do with the Maori people. They're just sort of not there. They're voiceless. And he kind of brings voice back into, gives Tuta, through Tuta. Um, it is Tuta's dancing with a white girl named Joyce at this ball that he's invited to. Uh, I mean, he's completely out of place there. He's the only Maori person, and it's for the. He compares. He says it's like the Raj, which is the empire and everything that was built in India. You know, and he's dancing with the girl, and he was. He says, and he was just about to leave her when he suddenly realized that after all, he and Joyce were both outsiders, really. And it came to him that bloody hell, if you did, if you'd not join them, as he would really want to do, if he really wanted to do that, then yes, he could beat them if he wanted to, not by giving in to them, but by being strong enough to stand up to them. And you can certainly, in this particular quotation, make connections with Potiki. Tuta Joyce is tall and lanky and wears glasses, and so she sort of sticks out. And she's not a normal person, if you will. And of course, he doesn't feel normal. As a matter of fact, the way they pronounce his name. Um, the way that they pronounce his name really means shit. They just can't pronounce his name correctly. Tuta, whom my father, another of these, as you find in Becca Lamb, where the majority of the households seem to be run by women, and Tuta's household is no different. So you might think in terms of the conflicts in Becca Lamb, what what is the significance of Becca's grandmother in relation to the conflicts with which Becca struggles, especially as you come to the end of the story, when she discovers important things about her grandmother and what she was able to survive. Now, also, you want to be thinking in terms of how Toisi's pregnancy affects Becca. Um, it's an important issue. I mean, if Becca can't make if Toisi can't make it, well, poor how think of how Becca looks up to Toisi. You also are reading this week an excerpt from Obasan, and in there, Sensei, he's actually the priest, says it is a high calling, my friends, the calling to forgive. But no person, no people is innocent. Therefore, we must forgive one another. But the narrator writes, I am not thinking of forgiveness. And so you want to discuss the juxtaposition of these two quotations. Think about it in the context of what happened to Grandma Kato and the narrator's mother, her own mother. She's been lied about until finally the the letter arrives, and one of the ancient aunts reveals the truth. Um, and you ask yourself a question. It's a good one, an easy one. I mean, a one that you could write 7 or 8 good sentences about is, why do you think that Kingston tells the story of Ah Gong in The Grandfather of the Sierra Nevada Mountains? I mean, why does she bother? What's the point of the story? It's not just to describe her grandfather's characteristics. You might think of in terms of what we've seen all along. That I just read you that quotation from Derek Walcott. When I was talking about um, the examination, the essay is that history never recognized him, and so think about the giving voice to the voiceless. In that context, you have another poem that's in the exam called "The United Fruit Company," um, and that wonderful, wonderful, and disturbing quotation at the end of the poem is, "And all the while, somewhere in the sugary hells of our seaports, smothered by gases, an Indian fell in the morning. A body spun off, an anonymous chattel, some numeral tumbling." Notice no specific names or anything like that, going all the way back to Identity Card and those others. So that you've read in the past about the numbered minority without any specific name. So there'll be 14 prompts written in the exam, 14 of them, and you'll be asked, and I just gave them to you, by the way, you'll be asked to talk about 5. So you have your nice description of what's going to be on the exam and what you all to do well, and you have examples from past exams of what a really good response is. So in addition to the revisions and the reading for this week, I want to just briefly talk again, as I did last week, about the special projects. Now, I used to have you write a second essay for the class, but global studies, of which this class for which this class fulfills requirements in your general studies area, you have to have an oral presentation, which I don't mind. I just don't like when I teach face to face. I wouldn't take up lots of class time. I would do exactly what I do in creative writing, for instance, is I have people talk about um, their poetry. Now, in this particular case, we have a general education class, and in this one, you asks you uh, to look back on your gen ed experience, if you will, or your majors, um, and to give a 7 to 10 minute oral presentation, which can be just YouTube. You don't have to use any, there is a way to do a PowerPoint presentation that you can load on YouTube or another place that has an oral component that tells people what's going on. Prezi you can do as well. Press a button, goes to the various 14 or 12, whatever things you have to say, and the reader hears your voice explaining the significance of all these things with respect to the with respect to what your big idea is. So, why are you writing this? Why are you making this presentation? And the subject of it. You can do it with a blog by loading up YouTube and then sharing the links. It's really, you have to share the links on the discussion threads with your fellow writers. Now, the content is really, what interests you about it, especially in terms of your own major, if you will. It doesn't have to be that way. You can offer, a character analysis of one of the characters, Toysey or anything like that, and read a paper if you want to. But I thought it'd be more interesting, instead of just writing another paper, that you could talk about things like the oil wealth in Trinidad. You can talk about you know, what is trying to remember the female genital mutilation, uh, about the in terms of gender roles and things like that. And one of the you can also do math. Um, something to do with math and statistics to support something that you want to argue about. The I don't know, the Gaddafi in Libya. The the what's happened with the Arab Spring. What's going on today in Zimbabwe? having to do with elections and things like that. The party to which Nelson Mandela belonged that got him sent to prison. Any of these things will work. As a matter of fact, one of our students, Blake Loffing, is a music major, and talked to me about, well, what kind of topic could I do? And I'm thinking, well, you just read The Spoiler's Return by Derek Walcott, in which he poses as a calypso singer. So why not offer a discussion about the role of the calypso player in Trinidadian society? Trinidad's where the Carnival originated. The calypso singer plays an important social role, and in the Spoiler's Return, it's the role of the critic, the social critic. Um, and especially of Trinidad, which after independence, he's arguing, hasn't done a hell of a lot to help the poor. You can talk about the role of the embargo in Cuban politics. All these things, anything that interests you, pursue it, and write up something and give a 7 to 10 minute uh, report to add to the knowledge of the other people in the class. It's a nice way of sharing things that you have done. Usually a professor reads a paper and no one hears anything about it. In this particular case, you have the chance to um, do something that interests you. You have questions about it, will this work or anything, just shoot me an email and I'll get right back to you. I don't want you to worry too much about this. It's supposed to be something fun, in matter of fact, that you can look at non-Western literature and the kinds of things we do and find an area that really interests you a lot, something about which maybe you know a lot. As Blake may not know right now a whole hell of a lot about calypso singing, but he does know about singing. And so this is a natural kind of area to look into. He could play some music in the background by the Mighty Sparrow, and talk about it. Talk about why calypso singing was banned in Trinidad at different times. It plays an important social role, and usually it was uh, not upholding the status quo of colonialism or of the neo-colonial government or things like that. So you have these various avenues to pursue, and I think you can have a good time doing it and add to the class. So there you have a more detailed description of the matter. Have a good one.